listening to Jerusalem Lights with Rabbi Chaim Richman, whose goal is Torah for everyone. I'm your co-host, Jim Long. And now, Rabbi Chaim Richman.
Shalom, co-host Jim Long.
Shalom, Rabbi. And I'm speaking to you, of course, from the Ozark Hills here in Middle America, and keeping safe and sound. Please tell me, what's it like for you today and for your family? I know that things are really, really getting tough in Eretz Israel.
Well, first of all, a hearty, heartfelt shalom to all of our wonderful listeners, wherever they may be, and may they be safe and healthy.
Amen.
And well. Well, actually, in the land of Israel, I think that the spin really of how to understand it is the attitude and the measures that are being taken by the government that are basically increasingly severe as far as the aspect of the lockdown, and it's all for our protection. Really, we are in a situation basically now where we are. In ever increasingly severe measures of lockdown in an effort to stop the spread of the virus. We're not to leave our homes other than for absolute necessities that have been approved, such as buying food and medicines and helping others that are more vulnerable. We are actually instructed, other than the permitted activities like those who have an authorization to work and for buying food, we're really not supposed to go more than 100 meters from our homes. And so it's really impacting everyday life, because it means that children and grandchildren cannot visit for fear of infecting their elders. This is all enforced by the police, by the way, with actually stiff fines and even arrests upon occasion. And I think the underscore here is that, the world, everyone within our listening range is going through such a major change. It's really practically impossible to put into words. I think those are the feelings that are going through the minds of and felt by the hearts of many, many people. It's taking us so long to process and to really articulate what it is that we're part of. And of course, we do believe that everything our Creator does ultimately is for the good, even if it's not revealed to us, even if the reason is not revealed to us. And as I have been saying consistently, and I feel this so strongly, all of humanity now is united in a new way, and really like never before. And so it's an unprecedented time in human history that we have a common goal. And although we are, all experiencing this social isolation, we're still afforded an opportunity to deepen our relationship with each other in a new way, and certainly to deepen our relationship with God, each of us in our own way.
Well, I know we can see it here in the U.S., and that is that it is an acid test. It's a litmus test. Hashem is making it so that the best and the worst of us is coming out, and we're seeing it in the. I even get tired of us talking about it. We're seeing it in the media. The media is proving to be, in some respects, it's not our best friend these days. The people in the media,
it has been for a long. It hasn't been our best friend since Walter Cronkite.
No, I'm completely, and please allow me to say this with some authority. I was in broadcast radio beginning in 1967, and I worked in radio for close to a little over 30 years. And I think I've mentioned this to you before. I saw the change in news reporting, in the attitude. It changed, and I worked with a lot of younger people coming up in the ranks, and I noticed that they all had one thing in common that was shocking to me, and that is they had a complete disregard for history. And for anyone who wanted to be in journalism, I thought that was an anathema. I thought that was a warning sign to me that of a very uninformed literati, if you will. And people in the media are saying the worst possible things right now. There is even, I know one of the guys at CNN, Don Lemon, said we shouldn't even listen to the presidential updates every day, even though he's surrounded by experts in the field whose lead he is taking. And, if you're tuning into this program and you hate President Trump, I'm sorry you feel that way. Get a life. I'm just going to say it. We need leadership right now. We don't need politicians. We need leaders, and that's what we're getting. I noticed that Bibi has even quarantined himself as a kind of an example.
Yes, it was actually from an abundance of caution. He had been exposed, I think, it turned out he hadn't been exposed for 2 weeks to one of his advisors that tested positive. And although he tested afterwards and everything is fine and he's completely negative, he did want to set that example. But Jim, it kind of bothers me also that we're even having to go in this direction, and that we need even to mention these things, because I think that when whether it's the media that are doing this or other people, I think to politicize this situation, to interpolate onto it political angles, is so impertinent, not prudent, improper, because we are in an unprecedented time. It doesn't matter. It's not a time for apportioning blame, and it certainly is a time for leadership. And we are basically being given a unique opportunity to renew our relationships with each other, and also to appreciate each other. First of all, for identifying with another person's plight and suffering, and expressing true caring and concern on an individual level, on a national level, on a global level. Nations have to help each other. Individuals have to help each other. It's certainly a time for growing. And, I got to tell you something that I consider to be so encouraging, Jim. So many people that I'm in touch with and that have been writing to me and that I'm trying to encourage, and we're trying to encourage each other, and I'm trying to provide a Torah mindset. You know how many people on their own are shining in the darkness and growing and saying, I can't even count how many people have said to me, I think that God is giving me an opportunity to grow.
Amen.
That is so encouraging to me, that when we come out of this onto the other side, that I'm so hopeful that it will be to a better world. Because first of all, I really do believe that it's up to us to make it into a better world. And one thing that I'm seeing so much of is the authorities in Israel, the various officials that are basically trying to slowly, gradually accustom people to hearing that whenever we return to normalcy, and by the way, no date is predicted for when that will be, it will not be the same normalcy. It will not be the same situation that it was before. I don't know what that means exactly, but things are apparently going to be different for a while. I think that testifies to the extent of what's going on now. And as of this moment, I mean, I don't, we're not a news program, Jim, but, I'm following the numbers, and I think we're moving up way over 800,000 confirmed cases throughout the world at the moment. And
the people, our brothers and sisters and our families in the urban areas, they really I'm praying mostly for them, because I was looking at the map of the U.S. today and the concentration of cases, and it's stark, because you have, for instance, here in Arkansas, we're a very rural state. We basically have, maybe 3 major population centers, and then you look at Oklahoma, they're very much the same. So the cases that we have right now, well, as we're doing this show today, we have around 560 confirmed cases. And thank God, only 8 deaths so far. But in Texas, the numbers exponentially rise up into the thousands, and it's because, of course, Texas has the major cities of some of the biggest cities. We have San Antonio, we have Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. And so we have kids who live in New York who have gone out into the upper state New York, and I think that this is where we're seeing that a lack of social distancing is really dramatically impacted. California is having crazy numbers right now.
And New York is unfortunately has become
Yeah,
the epicenter.
the epicenter,
And
exactly.
I personally have experienced a loss in extended family this week in New York, and
Oh.
unfortunately, I think a lot of people still don't understand how very real the danger is, particularly for older people, and it is a very serious situation. And I think that again, humanity has one common goal now, and that is to get through this. And I think that it is largely a time for growing for us, for concentrating on how we want to be, how we want the world to be. Usually, the way the Torah works, I think, the way the world works in the Torah's perspective of history, is that things are basically up to us. And it's up to us to strive to bring more light into the world. And again,
Well, I was
needs to be
looking.
reset, Jim. It's a switch.
Yeah, it is. I was looking at.
Here's to a better world when we get to the other side. You know,
I believe that. I believe that, and I believe, and if you'll permit me, I believe that this is just my worldview, because I think that we will be looking to your nation. I think we'll be looking to Israel for innovation in this area. I'm always impressed by what I see coming out of Israel. Have done so for years. I was telling you before the show that even my own living situation has improved vastly thanks to Israeli technology. I went to the doctor a few weeks ago, and I looked at a new piece of high-tech equipment over there, and I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, it's a, and he told me the lengthy name of the thing. And I said, "Wow." I said, "That's really amazing." He says, "Yeah, we got it from Israel." And the thing is that I think that Hashem has blessed the people of Israel. The foregone conclusion is that you're blessed with the light of Torah, with being able to teach the nations that there is a God, and the nature of Hashem and His plan. But you're also the people of Israel are also blessed with the light of technology. We're seeing innovation right now in that Israel is, I think, number 3 or 4 behind the U.S. in innovation. So, Baruch Hashem, I'm looking that Israel will not only show us the way out of this, that even the way that you and your families are responding personally to this present problem is an example for the rest of the world.
Amen. Jim, our prayers are for everyone, for the whole world, for everyone that's listening and everyone that's not listening, to stay healthy and safe, and always to be joyous and to be focused on the prize right now, which is getting through this.
And I would say also practice social media distancing. Stay away from negative people, negative, horrible comments about
all we
those
have
who.
now is social media, but let's use it responsibly.
Yeah, let's keep social media distancing for good mental hygiene.
Yes, and I think that this is such an important time for all of us, and honestly, the confluence of all of this going on in this season with these Torah portions, it's also amazing to me, if I might speak about that just for a moment, because, and by the way, next week is already the eve of Passover falling on Wednesday night of next week. So next week, because Passover is already the night of Wednesday the 8th, we're not going to have a podcast, but we will have one, God willing, during the week of Passover itself. So if I might just speak for a moment, also a little bit more about this idea, the whole concept of Passover is about leaving the narrow place behind, that Jim, Mitzrayim, means
Yeah.
basically constriction in a narrow place, and it's a certain experience of transcendence, and it's almost like a blending of past and present and future, and it's so amazing that when we have that Seder, that festive meal, Passover night, wherein we commemorate the Exodus, the Haggadah, which is the ancient text that we use to express our thanks to the Creator for the redemption and to observe the day. One of the famous statements of the Haggadah is that whoever does not picture himself as if he personally left Egypt this night has not fulfilled his obligation.
Yeah.
Right? Whoever doesn't personally feel that that Hashem actually took us out of Egypt, and I left myself, they haven't done it. They haven't fulfilled their job. So, one can ask, what does that even mean? How could you be expected to feel something that that happened thousands of years ago and that you clearly weren't part of? And how could the Torah, slap that obligation on a person? And so, notwithstanding the fact that actually you were there, your soul was there, but besides that, the idea is that it is an opportunity. It is a time for latching on to the potential inherent in the day to be liberated, to put the past behind us, to be free, to leave and the enslavement of Pharaoh and what Pharaoh represents, which is also mental slavery, as Bob Marley sings in Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. And that's really what Pharaoh really represents, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the spirit of negativity, everything that's holding us back, including our own fear and anxiety and vulnerability. There is an element for the whole world, not only for Israel, on Passover to avail itself of the ability to get free. And it's all about destiny. It's all about faith. Matzah is actually in the mystical writings of Torah called the bread of faith. And by the way, it's also called the bread of healing. And frankly, Jim, the world could use a strong dose of both right now, of both faith and healing. And
the prophetic, it's no secret that Egypt is prophetically and symbolically the values of the world that are anti-Torah values, that are anti-God values, and the idea that we're approaching a celebration of leaving Egypt at a time when we are basically all we're literally being pulled out of the mainstream of Egypt, of the world's values, by being forced to be at home with each other, by not partaking of the marketplaces and the all of the troubles that we can get into by simply being out there in the world.
Well, within the confines of our space, though, I mean, what would we be accomplishing if all we're doing is we're taking it inside with us? Because that you can do that so easily with your handheld. But so the thing is, the opportunity that we have in the space is to make the decision. And this is I think there's a process going on of sifting, of refinement and of shaking. Like I was mentioning to a friend this week the verses from Haggai where Hashem says, and I'm going to grab the whole world and shake it, and the finest things will come forth. Hashem is shaking up the heavens and the earth, and that's why I keep calling this a reset. I don't have a better way of describing it. It's a reset of the whole world. And the thing is, we could build a new world now, and I really believe that it's up to us. Passover, more than anything else, really brought hope to the world, hope for liberty, for justice, for anti-slavery, and this is really what our opportunity is now, what our challenge is.
I love that you're saying that, because my fear all my life, I think all of us, everybody in our age range, we, on a subliminal level, always sensed that there was a reset coming. And if this is the way Hashem is going to shake us up and give us a chance to literally hit the reboot, I think I would much rather, God forbid that people are losing their lives, but I would much rather it happen this way, where we have the chance to do something about it, than the alternative. And I'm talking about the nuclear holocaust that could happen. Hashem, in His mercy, is saying, "I'm going to put all of you in a place where you're going to have to see that it's not working." And I don't view this. I've never viewed disasters or catastrophes, even though God is in charge. It's the idea is that Hashem, because of free will, Hashem has allowed these things to happen, and say this is what happens when you are left to when humanity is left to its own devices. This is what happens when you don't follow simple precepts about cleanliness and hygiene, and even the treatment of animals, etc. The entire
and how
thing.
about the treatment of each other? How about the treatment of each other? I keep thinking to myself, I know maybe I'm really extreme about this, but I keep thinking to myself, and I've said it a number of times in the past couple of weeks, all of us are confined to our homes, and it's billions of people now. What is it? More than a fifth of humanity as of this moment? It's billions of people. I mean, India alone is 1.3 billion people. These figures are staggering, right? So we're all connected through social media, and yet we're all isolated from each other. And everything is uncertain. The future is so uncertain. Like I say, like returning to normalcy. A month ago, whoever imagined that we would be in this situation that we're in now, and yet, even though we are isolated and yet at the same time connected, what I think that it's a bit of a maybe a bold thought, but I really feel that there is a certain degree of midah keneged midah here. I don't want to join the chorus of all of the people who say that they have the answer right here in the palm of their hand, and they know exactly why this is happening, and this is why it's divine punishment. I'm really not doing that, but I feel in my own life very strongly, if I might say, I'm not prescribing and I'm not preaching, but I just feel, from my own knowledge of Torah and experience, and the way that I see the world, I think there is a very simple message here, which is that we have hurt others so badly, like you say, with social media. We have become so desensitized to real human emotion, real human connection. Everything has become so virtual that now we've been put into a situation where that's really all we have. Really, we can't hug anymore. You can't shake someone's hand anymore. You can't look into someone's eyes really and tell them how you feel. So maybe this is our chance to make a tikkun, because it's not, nothing is just a punishment from Hashem. That's not how it works. That's not our God, but it is an opportunity for us to reset ourselves. And that's why I keep saying, what kind of a world do we want it to be? Who do we want to be when we grow up? How do we want the world to be? We have the opportunity here to really reset ourselves, our hearts, our understanding, and take a good long look at how we communicate, and to try to rebuild here, to try to rebuild the post-flood world.
Yeah. The thing that is always fascinating to me is I used to look at the Torah portion, and especially when we get into the pages that we're into today, and in this week, in these next few weeks, and I would look at them, and I would skip over Parashat Tzav, because I would think, how in the world does this apply to our present situation? And I alluded to that just a second ago, because as I was rereading it last night, it struck me again how very prescient the idea of what is going on in this Torah portion over the minutia, if you will, of the olam, the sacrifices and the korbanot. And it was fascinating to me to read that. And I thought, hey, you know me, Rabbi, I'm always looking for the sort of what some people might consider the spices that are, the curious nods to uh, how can I point what's going on in this parsha to what's going on today? And again, I just alluded to it in the idea that uh, bring up a very graphic and a very distasteful thing. Some of what is going on today came out of these wet markets in China. And yet we look at the Torah parsha and the priests, many of the korbanot are eaten, are they not? And there are parts of the animal that the priesthood, the Kohanim, are told not to eat. And there's a washing of the meat for the korbanot. There are things that they do not eat. There are certain fats. There are the heads, the entrails. These are all burned up and not consumed whatsoever. And I look at this as saying that, you know what? Yes, I am Hashem. I created all things, but I didn't make everything for you to eat. Okay, and just like you shouldn't go out and eat a stick or a rock, there are certain parts of animals that you don't eat. And I hope I'm not bringing things onto a too mundane a level.
No, I think you're spot on. Now, the thing about this week's Torah portion, Parashat Tzav, first of all, it's a continuation of last week's portion of Vayikra. They both describe the service of the korbanot, but one main difference is the perspective of that last week's portion of Vayikra is from the vantage point of the one bringing the offering, whereas this week's portion of Tzav is from the perspective of the Kohen. Yeah. And there's a lot of rules that relate to the offerings that are relevant to the Kohanim that are officiating in the divine service. The thing is, every aspect of what's going on with these offerings is part of the process of a deep psychological process that leaves an individual profoundly affected, even chastised, even spiritually cleansed, because this isn't magic. This isn't replacing a human with an animal. This is about the significance of the relationship within a person, between himself and himself, between his godly soul and between his more base instinct, as we've been talking about. So there's various things that are described here. There's the mincha, the meal offering, the chatat and asham, which are sin and guilt offerings, the shlamim, peace offerings, the todah, thanksgiving offerings, and all of these korbanot offerings are applicable to various situations. And the bottom line is it is all about coming close to Hashem, because that's the function of everything that we're learning about and the purpose of everything that takes place in the Holy Temple. But there's a constant effort going on to separate between the animal nature and the godly soul, which sometimes is sullied. And so this process that's going on all along is about drawing close of a person's own free will and about making this distinction. And every aspect of the details that we're reading about, as far as the various limbs and what's to be burnt and what can be eaten, and all, it's kind of beyond the scope of a podcast, because there's so much knowledge and information and meaning about everything that's going on here.
Can I ask you something as a point of clarification about this parsha that I perceive, and I hope it's not a misperception, and I wanted to ask you this, that the distinction between last week's parsha, or even the previous two parshiot, and this one is, we talked about in the previous Torah portions how there was a bringing forth of, Hashem said, from your heart. Bring these offerings as your heart moves you. And the difference, at least I see this, and I need your clarification on this. The distinct difference is that this parsha is called Tzav, which I believe is the same root as mitzvah.
Command.
Okay.
Sure.
Is Hashem not? Is there not a distinction between the fact that in the previous portions Hashem says, "As your heart moves you, this is what I want you to do," but I want you to do this according to the initiative of your own heart. And this parsha, God is saying to the Kohanim, "I command you." Now, this is the way you have to do it. Is that not the distinction? Is that we go from the leanings of the heart to, look, if you're going to be part of my priesthood, you have to do this a certain way. I'm commanding this.
Exactly. In other words, it's still a question of the heart. It's still a question of one's desire to have this experience. But Hashem is saying, but if you're going to do it, it must be this way, because this is my perspective, he's saying.
Right,
So
exactly.
if you're going to do it, I command that you do it this way. But everything here, again, is designed for the uplifting of a person. And you said it in the very beginning, Jim, how you used to skip over these parshas. And unfortunately, a lot of people have that attitude. It's like they're like, how can I possibly even make this relevant? And again, all of that comes from an inherited mindset that we have, which is foreign, which is not ours, which is not Torah, which is not Jewish. It is the mindset of a pagan world that is looking at this as through the lens of what that world perceives this whole thing to be about. Whereas actually Hashem has designed it here for a constantly evolving species, man, to constantly be moving and elevating and changing and redefining itself all the time. And honestly, I think we can relate to the fact that this is the danger, in the human experience, is in becoming old and becoming worn out and becoming insensitive. And that's, again, if I may speculate, kind of what's going on now, how we have the opportunity now to reevaluate and reset. I just want to give you one example of how this whole thing works. Okay, so we begin Parashat Tzav, and of course, Bezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help, in our video lesson this week, we will examine a number of points about what's being discussed in Parashat Tzav, to whatever extent we can. And in a podcast, it's kind of just difficult to learn about the whole parsha. I want to say, though, that the parsha begins in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 6, talking about what's going on in the proximity of the altar. Right? This is the law of the burnt offering. It is the burnt offering that stays on the flame, on the altar, all night until the morning. And the fire of the altar should be kept aflame on it. And, the altar is very, very significant. The place of the altar, it's you could say it's the heart of the Beit HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple, because everything takes place either around it or near it. All the offerings, the daily offerings, the additional offerings, the individual and congregational offerings, all the major ceremonies in the temple take place near the altar. And so, and I spoke about this also in last week in Parashat Vayikra, the whole idea of a person coming to this place of contrite spirit, of trying to reinstate his humanity, of trying to understand where he's been, where he wants to go, and he comes to the place of the altar. And do you know that there is a deep teaching that the place of the Mizbeach, the place of the altar, is the place from whence Adam Harishon was created? Have you heard that, Jim?
Sure. And then it was literally the Holy of Holies in the temple was literally the site of that original Mizbeach where he was created. Is that not correct?
Well, close. There's an idea that there's a relationship, like a spiritual conduit between the place of the altar and the place of the Ark of the Covenant, and on that level of that parallel dimension, as it were, the Holy of Holies is the place of the tree of life. And the place of the altar is the place of the tree of knowledge. But there's a statement that the Midrash makes that Adam was created from the very spot which brings about atonement for him. And again, atonement here is not about tit for tat. It's not about replacement. It's not about something dying in your stead. It's about realigning and realizing the sanctity of life and resetting again. How many times have we said that? And recalibrating and realizing where I've gone askew. So the precise location of the altar is so exact from the very beginning of time, and that this is where King David had mapped out the altar and actually had himself dug the foundations for, that was later to be actually built by his son, King Solomon. And it was on the spot of the altar that Avraham bound Yitzchak, Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac took place here.
Yeah, right.
So there is an amazing, process that's going on when a person comes to this place and has kind of this experience of knowing this is where I come from. I am Adam. This is where I come from, and I want to get back to basics. Why is it that Adam was created from the place that brings him atonement? What does that even mean? It means that the process through which a person can elevate his own humanity by emphasizing the difference between Adam, between man, between his life force, between his job in this world, his distinction, his privilege, his chosenness as Adam, and that of the rest of the world. It all configures around this place, which is kind of like the celebration of the life of man. And frankly, again, unfortunately, there is a blurring in this world between man and animal, which has a lot of repercussions in everyday life.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I find fascinating about every Torah parsha, if you really look deeply at it on the most primordial level, it seems as if every Torah parsha, the layer of messages that Hashem is teaching us, the beginning, the core teaching always seems to be in the words of Joni Mitchell, let's get back to the garden. And the funny thing about this is this struck me so strongly a couple of years ago when I was reading this parsha, especially this one, which I used to find so difficult. And Baruch Hashem, Hashem has opened up this Torah parsha to me in that, we look at this, the whole parsha is just simply about the investiture, how to what they should eat and what they should wear, the Kohanim. And isn't that really what happened in the garden? Is that now we're going back to the garden, and Hashem is saying, guess what? Here's something that I'm commanding you that you can eat. This is not forbidden for you to eat. So the Kohanim, in the stead of Adam Rishon and Ahava, Eve, they're literally eating food that is permitted to them. And then secondly, God rewards them by saying, I'm not going to put clothes on you to protect you from being naked. I'm going to clothe you, the Kohen Gadol and the Kohanim, in clothes of glory, because you have consumed the food in a proper manner, and because
Hashem commands, and because you have the heart to want to come close to Him, and then Hashem says, "So then do it this way, please." It is a model world,
yeah.
And so much of our experience today, our world is virtual, is not real, and that is what the tabernacle, Holy Temple experience is all about. It's about something that is so tangible, so real. It's a drama that's unfolding in the life of a person, wherein he's constantly challenged to try and elevate himself above the confines of the murkiness of what this world can be.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is another thing going on. There is another mechanism going on here, in that we are in a place right now, this very moment, for all of us that are listening to the podcast, for you and I talking, this particular global experience is a reflection, I believe, of the attitude that we have for this very parsha. And that is that if you read this parsha about the taking these kosher animals and preparing them for offering, and putting them, taking their lives and offering them up, and putting them on the altar and burning them, eating some of them, burning them. If you read this, this is very much a reflection of what's going on in the world today. Hashem, I think, is giving people an opportunity to admit to themselves in this present circumstance, do you believe in me? Because you and I both know there are even Jews who read this and go, this is disgusting. I can't read this. And I'm saying, no, you read it because there is beauty in this. There is a model for, even in these seemingly mundane operation, in that the fire can never now go out. And it's all about service to Hashem, which in essence is service to humanity. And that fire, you mentioned it, the fire is on the altar is the heart. The passion is that fire for service of the priesthood. And it's saying to Israel even today, you are my priesthood, and the fire in your heart is supposed to continue every day.
This is exactly the meaning of the verse. Fire shall burn there on the altar constantly; it shall not be extinguished. You said it also, Jim, in the beginning when you mentioned the word tzav, which means command. And there are so many people whose attitude is, this is antiquated and outdated, and I want nothing to do with it. It is, I have to apologize for it. We've evolved since then. And what right do we have to take an animal's life? Who would do such a thing? I'm okay, you're okay. They have the same rights that we do, and the difference is that Hashem begins by saying, I command you to do this. I didn't ask your opinion. This is how I want you to conduct yourself. I want you to go through this experience. And the bottom line that a lot of people can't accept and won't accept is the next part of that sentence is Hashem is saying, because you are more important to me than the animals, and everything that I created. It doesn't mean that we're not compassionate. It doesn't mean that you, God forbid, a person should be cruel to an animal, but this is actually a sanctification of the animal world. And Hashem is saying everything and this is what people can't get through their heads and don't want to hear because it gives them too much responsibility, which of course is the bottom line of the entire Holy Torah, is taking responsibility for ourselves and our place in the world. But Hashem is saying everything that I created in this world, I created for you to be able to utilize in order for you to get closer to me and for you to have a positive experience. And you are the most important thing. Everything else is secondary to you.
It's a restatement of the command given to Adam Rishon in Gan Eden. Is that he was to keep the garden, he was responsible for everything in the garden, including the animal realm.
And not only that, but if we don't have this perspective of Hashem's point of view, which is basically what Parashat Tzav, this Torah portion really is all about Hashem's perspective. Mm-hmm. If we don't have it, then we can also slip into a place where we don't appreciate our self-worth, and we actually idealize or idolize the other part of the world. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Because you said earlier something about how everything that Egypt represents is, how did you put it in a very, very stark way about what Egypt represents?
Well, it represents the mores and the ideology that is anti-Torah. It rejects the worldview, the Torah view of the world, and it says the worldview of Egypt is the prevailing worldview. Right. It's how you should live your life, and it's not.
So here's the amazing thing about that. If you open up your heart in the deepest way, this coming Shabbat, which is the Shabbat of Parashat Tzav, right, is also called Shabbat Hagadol.
Yeah.
It is called the Great Sabbath. It is not one of the 4 special Sabbaths that precede Passover. It is the Sabbath that is actually before Passover Eve. It's called Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Sabbath. And there's a number of reasons for that. One famous reason traditionally for why it's called Shabbat Hagadol is because it comes from words that we read at the conclusion of the Haftarah, the prophetic reading for this Sabbath. Comes from the prophecy of Malachi, which is as follows: the words where he states in the last verse of the Haftarah of Shabbat HaGadol in Malachi chapter 3, behold, it's verse 23, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Hashem. And he will turn back to God the hearts of the fathers with their sons and the hearts of sons with their fathers. And so because it's called, because the verse states the coming of the day, Hagadol of Hanorah, the great and awesome, and that's a verse that we read. So some people opine that that's why we call it Shabbat Hagadol. But there's a more basic reason why it's called Shabbat Hagadol, because it refers to the great miracle that happened on that Shabbat. And what was it? It goes back to the Torah portion in Exodus chapter 12, which is Parashat Bo, which we read in the Shabbat of Chodesh Nisan. And chapter 12 tells us that Hashem commands to Moshe and Aaron that on the 10th day of the month, each person will take a lamb or kid for each father's household into the house, right? What happened? What do we read about here in chapter 12 of Exodus? It shall be yours for examination until the 14th day of this month. The entire congregation of the assembly of Israel shall slaughter it in the afternoon, and then they would put the blood on the doorpost. This is the first Passover, right? The Passover that was yet in Egypt. So God commanded them 4 days in advance to take the lamb into the house, and basically they tied it to the bedpost, which is in itself a very, very deep thing. Why the bedpost? I have a whole idea about that if you care to hear, but that's not my point right now. So they took the lamb, they tied it to the bedpost on the 10th day of the month, which that year happened to be a Shabbat. Mm-hmm. And they kept it in the house until the 14th, the afternoon of the 14th, the eve of Passover, when the Korban Pesach, the first Passover offering, was brought there in Egypt. And then that night, of course, was the Exodus. So what happened here? The Egyptians worshipped this animal,
right? As we call it, Aries in the Mazal, the ram. In fact, all of the plagues were tied to an Egyptian god.
So listen, the Egyptians worshipped this animal. Open up your heart in the deepest way and listen to what's going on here, right? The Egyptians are worshiping this animal. And that day, the Jews go out and each one takes one and starts to pull it into the house. And they're all standing around, Jim, the whole nation. And they're all saying, like, what the heck are you doing? What do you think you're doing, Jew?
Really?
What are you doing, Jew?
Yeah.
And they all said, we are going to slaughter this lamb because God told us to do it.
Yeah.
And you know what the sages say? They all just stood there with their mouths open and they just were totally struck with awe. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't move. They could say nothing. They couldn't respond. They were like, they were just totally transfigured by the audacity, chutzpah, the holy audacity of the Jewish people. And this was a great miracle that they didn't even respond. I don't know if it was such a miracle or if this is what true Jewish destiny is really all about, true Jewish fortitude, moxie, however you want to call it. But on the deepest level, I think what this is really all about is, and this is just so amazing to me and really dovetails into what you were saying about what Egypt represents. Jim, what is this story really all about? This Shabbat is called Shabbat Hagadol. And it's all about this verse that I just read, that Hashem instructed them 4 days before the Exodus to take the lamb into the house. And the Egyptians, their reaction was just absolute stupefaction. But what this is really telling us is so deep, is that this is what the Jewish people are commanded to do then and today, in that world and in this world. The job of Israel is to slaughter the idolatry of the world before its very eyes.
Yeah.
And whether or not we are willing to accept that mandate, whether or not it's comfortable for us, whether or not it's politically correct, whether or not it's popular, we can't get away from it. And I'll explain what I mean by that too. We can't get away from it. That is our job in this world. We slaughter the idols of this world before the world's eyes and teach the world to be liberated, to be free, to leave it behind, to leave the narrow place. And also notice how this dovetails so strongly with Parashat Tzav, like we've been saying. I command you, Hashem says, do you mind? This is what I want. This is how I want you to do it. It's not about your opinion. You're sensitive to the animals. Be sensitive to yourselves. Don't be an animal. This is what I want from you. This is what takes place in this place, because this is the central arena for the evolvement of your spiritual maturity. Mm-hmm. But I have this idea that I really believe is true, that I've been thinking about for many years, because our sages tell us, nothing that the sages say is anecdotal. They have these incredible insights that are strong poetic vehicles for us to be able to understand something on a very deep psychological level. And they go out of their way to tell us that this is not in the verse. This is the tradition that Moshe gave over, that this lamb was tied to the bedpost.
Yeah.
Why? Why the bedpost? Why go out of your way to tell me that?
Was it to bring the lamb to where it became part of the family, and there was an idea that the sacredness of the bed? I don't know. I mean,
well, certainly, if you are raising an animal and looking into its eyes, and sheep's eyes are pretty human as well. There's something about them.
It's a very sweet animal.
It will become more difficult for you and more of a deep experience. But what I was thinking is, the bed is the comfort zone, Jim. Hiding in bed, pulling the sheets over you. It's a concept that we're all familiar with. It's like leave me alone. It's like, that's my one safe spot. Mm-hmm. And so Hashem said,
my sanctuary. It's
exactly,
my sanctuary.
Exactly. So Hashem said, you know what? Are you listening to this? Like, open up your heart in the deepest way. This is
I am.
Hashem is saying, you cannot escape me. Yeah. You cannot escape me. You cannot escape your destiny. This is it. There's no rehearsal. This is it. You take it, and the one place that you might think to go and hide from me and comfort yourself and cover up, and maybe this is going to go away and I'll wake up, it's just a bad dream. No. Take the covers off your eyes. There it is, staring at you in the face. This is who you are. This is your job in this world. Take it seriously. This is who you are. You are entrusted to break down the immorality of the world, to bring the world home to me. That's what this is all about. And so too, now, Jim, I just think it's so incredibly powerful that we're all going through this now. Pass over it, and we're all stuck. But yeah, isn't this ironic that we're all stuck in one place? Wow, isn't that Don McLean, American Pie? And there we were, all in one place, a generation lost in space. Right here, we all stuck in one place, and yet we are about to tell the story of the exodus of leaving this constriction into freedom. We're about to sit at the Seder night, the night of passage, the night that we actually left Egypt. And yet here we are stuck. How does that even work? Humanity is all like bound up, but yet we're talking about escaping from bondage. So it seems to me that it's perfect. It seems to me it's not ironic. It seems to me Hashem is not laughing at us. Hashem is not teasing us. I can't even say it. It's so powerful. It's almost as if Hashem is saying, "Do it now." It's like, act it out. This is it. It's real. It's like Hashem is saying, this Passover, you're no longer telling a story. You're no longer commemorating something that really happened once before. This Passover, you need a new exodus. You need, like never before, to tell this story of freedom and to live it. Yeah. And when you eat that matzah, which is bread of faith, which is bread of healing, we have to recall that story, but yet lead our own ways into a new one, into building a new world. And you know what else comes to mind? This verse in Parashat Beshalach, and this is unbelievable. What happened? They crossed the sea on the 7th day of Passover, and they come to Mara, and the water is bitter. And Hashem shows him the tree, and he throws it into the water. The water becomes sweet. Hashem says, if you hearken, this is in Exodus 15, the end of chapter 15, if you hearken diligently to the voice of Hashem your God, and do what is just in his eyes, give ear to his commandments, and observe all his decrees, then any of the diseases that I placed in Egypt, I will not bring upon you. For I am Hashem, your healer. It's like we are basically like, oh my goodness, talk about reset and restart. It's as if we are able now to relive all of this in a brand new way, and so that we could build a new world, a world where there won't be sickness. Hashem is saying, I am your healer. I won't bring the diseases upon you. But if you hearken diligently to the voice of Hashem, your God, and do what is just in his eyes. So I'm not being a doomsday preacher. I'm saying, can't we at least just think to ourselves, have we been hearkening? Have we been doing what's just in his eyes? And if we look at ourselves, each one of us, and find a place that could be healed and find a place that could be improved, let's do it. Let's do it together. Let's make a commitment.
This is so stark. This is so absolutely stark. I think that being in Israel for this Pesach will probably be one of the most remarkable experiences for you and all of your family and the family of Israel, in even those that are in the diaspora. You will have to remain in your houses as the plague passes by. It's talk about
it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And everybody is at home, Jim. And this is like someone said to me, historically,
yeah.
If you want to hear something outrageous, a thought, this might be the first time in history since around the era of Hanukkah, when Jewish prayer was basically prohibited in communal prayer, and now of course it's prohibited for the sake of preserving life, for the sake of preventing the spread of infection from distancing. And of course, it's not only Jewish prayer; it's all prayer of all people that has to be alone now. All gathering has to be curtailed. But so it's such an incredible moment in history when we have to totally examine ourselves, and it's harder, according to Torah, to elevate a prayer when you're by yourself. That the whole concept of community prayer is that it has power, and an individual prayer it's harder to elevate. It's more of a challenge.
Of the minyan, right?
Yes,
the minyan is the idea of that. Yeah,
and yet this is the situation that we're all in now. We really have to. Again, it's like it seems to me that even though we're all apart, that in many ways we're being challenged to be more connected than ever before.
Yeah, and I would submit that I would challenge any of you listening to read Parashat Tzav, and really, this reminds me of the in some respects there is reminiscent for all people right now of what was going on in the antediluvian world, in the pre-flood world, when people said, basically, the idea being that people in the days of Noah thought that as long as they were alive, that they were living the lives that God allowed them to live, because they lived so many years that God said, well, if they said among themselves, well, basically, I must be living right because I'm still alive, because God, quote, hasn't killed me. And what they did is I've heard described as there's a concept where the pre-flood world actually split the attributes of Hashem. And they said amongst themselves, those of the flood generation said, um, if they had been given a copy of this parsha to read, they would have said, except for one family, the pre-flood world would have said, I don't want to worship a God who would allow animals to be treated like that. I don't want to believe in a God that allows death. And they made their own judgment. They passed a judgment on the Creator, and they basically forgot, because Hashem comes from a place of at the same time of mercy and justice. They coexist.
People don't want to admit that man is holy, that man has holy potential, that human life is sacred, and so what really goes on in the Holy Temple is it is a validation of and a celebration of the sanctity of human life, and really of all life. Because now what happens is that the world is a slaughterhouse, and has become totally insensitive.
Yeah. There is this idea we can't prove it, of course, but there is this idea that when the temple was in full blossom in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, that when everything was being done according to his command, to Hashem's command, and the daily korbanot were being in operation, that there were no wars in the world, that bloodshed had come to either not existing or was at a complete minimum.
There is an idea that our sages express. I think it is historically accurate that the first 40 years of Solomon's temple, there was not one war anywhere in the world, because that was the whole spiritual harmony of humanity. Jim, I wanted to bring something up to you before we run out of time, because you're a professional Egyptologist, and so this whole season must really resonate with you, because you've spent a great deal of your life working on the whole concept of the historicity of the biblical rendition of the Exodus.
Yeah.
I caught an item in the news. Actually, it was reported several weeks ago, but it's still being reported, that there is an extremely, I quote, an extremely alarming desert locust swarm forming in the Horn of Africa that is set to descend upon the Middle East just in time for Passover, but is predicted to skip over the land of Israel. And the article described it as a plague of locusts, the likes of which have been unseen for over 30 years, about to hit Africa and the Middle East. And it's called a perfect biblical storm.
Wow.
And apparently there's an organization called Locust Watch, which is a division of the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, that is monitoring this migratory pattern of the desert locust, which is the most destructive migratory pest in the world, that apparently is growing to millions right now of individual units that apparently, what did I read here? Each one can destroy. Each one. I guess the swarm has the capacity to consume the same amount of food in one day as 35,000 people. In any event, gosh.
There, and of course there is an ancient Egyptian document that attests to that particular plague and others, and we speak about it in my documentary and in my book, and the fact that the famous Ipuwer papyrus actually has an Egyptian sage lamenting the fact that there is no green thing, there is no herb left in the fields.
Wow.
And if we have a chance, with your permission, maybe in the next podcast during the week of Pesach, maybe we can talk about how the Egyptian historical record reflects the reality of the Exodus experience and the plagues.
Wow, that's a great idea. That's something to look forward to. That will be such a great show to have during Passover next week. So I will very much look forward to that, Jim. Thank you.
Well,
I also want to. I'm sorry.
No, I said let's do that, and of course explore the spiritual impact. Obviously, of that. I'm looking forward to hearing about what and I would urge people to tune in. And this is a shameless plug on my part. I'm very much looking forward to hearing because we'll do the podcast after you've had your first the Passover night, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm looking forward to hearing about that experience from you, what it's like to have the first night of Pesach in Eretz Israel during this amazing time, and we'll talk about the historical aspect of the plagues and of the Exodus.
The Seder is all about giving over the concept of Hashem taking us out of Egypt and the birth of freedom for all of humanity. Seder means order, because there is an order of events that are followed during that evening, and there is an order to the world. There is an order to the world. Everything does make sense. There is a creator, and that night that we're all going to be talking about escape from bondage, let's all earn our own exodus back to freedom. We'll tell the story of our exodus from Egypt, and whether we're having a Seder with family or whether we're all by ourselves, or tell it to ourselves, that's the most important thing of all. That we tell ourselves that we can become free.
I'm so looking forward to that, and we'll open the next week's podcast with the question: why is this podcast different than all other podcasts?
Excellent.
By the way, I want to do a little plug for the organization that you are now the head of, which is the Jerusalem Lights.
The URL is www.rabbiRichman.com. The email is rabbi@rabbiRichman.com.
Okay.
I want to remind our listeners that this Sunday, God willing, we will be having another Zoom session. Getting ready for Passover. We had two really nice sessions the past 2 weeks on the subject of prayer. And any of our listeners that have not yet written in an email requesting the sign-in information, the password, and the meeting ID, are invited to do so. We're going to start having these Zoom classes only by ID. Just because of some interruptions that are going on in the world of Zoom, we're advised to set a password for the meeting, and everyone is invited who writes in and can receive the password in advance. And even though, again, we are all isolated in our own lockdown, there are so many opportunities that are presented to us all for reaching out, for acts of kindness, for checking up on those neighbors that may need help. And there are so many things that we can do to tip the balance of the scale of the world now. So these are all ways that we can help each other during this time, and we should be looking for those opportunities because nobody is really alone. Nobody should really be completely alone.
All right.
So I want to wish all of our...
Let me take this opportunity to say in advance, Chag sameach.
Exactly. Wish all of our listeners a wonderful Pesach, Festival of Freedom. May we truly merit to leave Egypt behind, to walk upright towards recognition of Hashem's sovereignty in the world, towards true freedom, and towards the dignity of man, towards a new world, towards healing, towards the love and light of Hashem in this world, and our true connection to each other. And may it be just all for blessing and health and safety for all.
Amen.